Okay, welcome everybody to this sort of extra session that Ylva and the program committee was so gracious to allow us to present here today. And what we're going to do, talk about, some of you already heard about that, those that you attended the morning session when Mila Oiva, one of the editors of this book, gave a plug for the book and also for this session. So this is in a way continuation of that discussion, hopefully, and of course an expansion of that discussion also. So what we're going to talk about today is the new book, Digital Histories, Emergent Approaches Within the New Digital History, edited by myself together with Mila, Oiva, and Petri, Paju. And as I said, Mila is here in the conference, and I think she also is attending there. And so if you have any questions, she can also help out with them, hopefully, in the discussion after this. And we're going to have a presentation with some of the authors of this book listed here, and I will give more introduction to them later on. And me, myself, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Mats Fridlund. I'm a Deputy Director of the Center for Digital Humanities at the University of Gothenburg. And as I said already, one of the editors of this new book that will be published on Tuesday. So what I'm going to do now is going to give a short sort of historical background, or a little prehistory, as I said here, the prehistory of the book. And then I'm going to sort of talk a little bit about the book, the actual sort of content of it. And then after that, we're going to have short summaries of some of the chapters from the book. And like many good things, it all began with the fika, I said here. And what I mean by that, this sort of goes back to 2013, when I and Jessica Parland-von, one of the authors and also one of the presenters here today, met over a fika and talked about what we could do sort of to foster digital humanities in Finland. I was then a professor at Aalto University in Finland. So, and thanks to Kenneth Nygren, I sort of had got in contact with Jessica, and we soon came up with that maybe we should try to form a network about digital humanities in Finland. And that network then started to do some research symposiums, and then also it led to some project applications, and also led to that me and Jessica participated in the DH hackathon, the first sort of Finnish, first hackathon in the world, probably, in digital humanities, in that kind of setting, and also with that kind of content. And anyway, what led to the basically number of historians in Finland that was interested in digital history got together at one point in 2015 to submit a grant application to the Kone Foundation, because we basically felt that we should do something together, jointly, that would be good for all of us, not just for individual historians with the individual project. We tried to come up with sort of a collective project that would be good for all of us and good for history in Finland and digital history in Finland. So we came up with this idea to submit a grant proposal to the Kone Foundation that we described as towards a roadmap for digital history in Finland. The idea with that was basically to find out what should we do to foster the development of digital historical scholarship in Finland. And I was sort of designated by this group as the PI, this group of senior Finnish historians, and we were lucky enough to get that grant. And with that grant, we could then employ a postdoc, which became Petri, Paju. And I said almost before that because Petri and I had already met before this, so we sort of knew each other since before. But anyway, through this grant, we then applied Petri, Paju, and we made this sort of inquiry with Finnish historians, what we could do sort of for digital history in Finland. And one of the sort of salient points that came out of this inquiry, that was need for more education and more knowledge about digital history methods. So while this project was sort of finishing, this was just a one-year project, but while this project was finishing, we then designed a follow-up project that we called From Roadmap to Roadshow, where the roadmap was the part of the first project. But now the idea would then be to take this sort of basically to pick up on the point that we should sort of do something to foster knowledge about digital humanities method. And we did that through a roadshow. And we got almost 120,000 euros for this. For this project. And through that project, we could also then employ another postdoc. We could keep on employing Petri. We could also employ Mila Oiva as a postdoc of that project. And so that we did. So the project then, we did part of that project. We did a roadshow to 6 universities in Finland: Oulu, Jyväskylä, University of Eastern Finland, Universities of Turku, Tampere, and Helsinki. And we did this with part of the project was that we employed Johan Jarbrink, which I know is at the conference. I don't know if he's here also right now. And also Joe Guldi, which we also hope will be one of the presenters later today, together with some other Finnish historians and ourselves. So we went out to these 6 universities and informed and gave sort of a session, a half-day or 2 half-day sessions at these universities about methods and about what you could do and how you could do digital history. And you see some of the pictures there on the right-hand side. You see some of the pictures from the Roadshow, and you see several of the authors of the forthcoming book also in these pictures, among them especially Petri, Paju, and Mila Oiva, that you can see there, and myself also at the bottom. Anyway, so this was the idea. We did this Roadshow, and it was very successful. And then sort of at the end, what you see here, the picture here in Mila, is sort of the picture taken after the roadshow was over, 1:45 on a Thursday, I believe it was. So everything was done, and we had made some point about what we should do next. That's what the green arrow is implicating there. It says what to do next. And one of the things that came up there, maybe we should do some courses and so on, or maybe we should do a symposium on this research. Anyway, the roadshow was over. The project was more or less over. We should write up the project with some publications, but basically it was more or less over. But at the same time, we felt like there was a lot of enthusiasms there. More than 120 historians that attended this roadshow in Finland. And it felt like it was a lot of enthusiasm. So why stop now? We've been talking about how to do research. We're sort of talking about it, but we hadn't actually done it. So we think that maybe we should try to push this a little bit further. And thanks to the funding from the corner, and also I had some extra funding, we basically decided that we should take another step. We should try to go all the way, so to speak. So we basically then decided to do a digital history workshop, 2 days, basically less than 2 months after this roadshow was over. And we invited historians and computer scientists to come to this workshop. So what you see here is the invitation to the workshop. It says, are you a historian interested in starting digital research, but don't know where or how to start? Have you got an idea for your first DH publication and you want to learn how to collaborate? If yes, this workshop is designed for you. So basically what this was a matchmaking exercise, you can say. We invite some computer scientists and some historians, and basically try to have them come up with joint projects, a short sort of feasible project. It was 20 people attended this workshop, and that was a success. That also, as the roadshow, basically led them to sort of that. We then took many of these successful projects from this workshop and put together a book proposal that we sent to Helsinki University Press in June, so basically less than a month after this. And they were enthusiastic about it, Helsinki University Press. And then in December, we got the author contracts, and the rest is history, or rather, the rest is what we're going to present today. The rest is the book that came out of this. And this is the book that came out of this, or will come out of this. Digital Histories, Emergent Approaches within the New Digital History. And very shortly, this is an open access book. I mean, we are digital historians, so the book should also be a digital history book in a sense, in more senses than one. It's available and open access, also on print. So it will be available open access on Tuesday, if everything works out. You can get it from the website of Helsinki University Press, hup.fi. It has 17 chapters with 33 authors, so you then understand that many of these chapters are co-authored, as we will see soon. It's both single author, but also collaborative sort of chapters. The historians and computer scientists, the information technologists that participate in the books are from universities and institutions in Finland, Sweden, the US, Estonia, and Poland. And the coverage of the sort of the content matter of these chapters are going from the medieval period until the present day, and to some degree also into the future, because we have some chapters, myself included, that sort of speculate somewhat about how could the future be for digital history in general. As I said, it's out, if anything works out, on Tuesday, December 8th. And you can also get it there on the website. Or you, of course, can also get the print version book of it. Good. And this is sort of what this book is about, actually. This is from the backside blurb of the book, where it says that historical scholarship is currently undergoing a digital turn. All historians experience this. So this is basically arguing that I think it's clear that it's undergoing a digital turn. And this is something that all historians experience, and this is, of course, something that we should describe. We are then showcasing this emerging wave of digital history research. So this is the idea to present a number of these cases. And doing it in through ways. We both have uncovered new empirical historical knowledge through digital and computational methods, as I said, from the medieval period to present day. And this was an important point for us. What we want to do in this book is not just to talk, as previously has been sort of the majority of books within digital history. I've been talking about the potential, the promise, and what you could do with digital history, but we actually want to do it. This is sort of, as we say below, that we argue that digital history is entering a mature phase, digital history in action. We're actually doing digital history more than talking about what could be done. We also do some talking about sort of what could be done and sort of the potential and problems, but even more so, we are presenting new historical scholarship that's been produced using digital methods. And we're using, as I said, an exemplary array of methods, such as digital metadata analysis, machine learning, with network analysis, topic modeling, then entity recognition, collocation analysis, critical search, and text and data mining. So, so they said, it argues that digital is entering mature phase, but it also, as I said, also including some novel challenges and digital methods post-historical research. So it's not just sort of new empirical historical scholarship, but it's also sort of thinking about conceptual work, thinking about this new kind of digital history. And these are the table of contents for the book. And it's divided into 4 parts. With the first part is the beginning, and we have then a part about making sense of digital history, which is sort of more conceptual studies, and you will have a presentation by Jessica Parland-von Essen about this, summarizing her chapter there. And then we have sort of what's marked in green here, the more empirical chapters here, new sort of empirical scholarship in digital history. And we have going to have 3 presentations of that. And then we have last also a conclusion with Joe Guldi, American digital historian. And also said here, marked at Timo Honkala. We actually were lucky enough, it's sad to say, to get a forward by Timo Honkala, but sadly, Timo passed away during the production of this book. So that's also one of the reasons that we dedicated this book to his memory. Timo Honkala was a pioneering digital humanist in Finland, coming from sort of the science and technology background, but was very much sort of in tune with and also in communication and conversation with several of us sort of digital humanists and digital historians. He was one of the earliest persons I met together with Jessica when I came to Finland and started to get interest in this in digital humanities and digital history. So he was very sort of helpful to many of us, and so we felt that it was right to dedicate this book to his memory. Sadly, as I said, we got this forward, but yeah. So that's one of the sad aspects of this book. Otherwise, we sort of, I think most of this is very positive aspects of this book, but that's of course very sad aspect. But nevertheless, we're very happy to have his forward there. Let's try to give a sort of a more perspective from the technology, how sort of the digital history could be now and in the future. Okay, so then I've given sort of an introduction here. So what I'm going to do now, we're going to have sort of short presentations from 5 of these chapters from the book here. And we're going to start in following the order here, as you see here on the screen here, starting with Jessica Parland-von Essen, then go to Heidi, Kurvinen, Mela, Risto, Turunen, and at the end, Joe Guldi is going to give summarizing her conclusions, where she basically take a bigger perspective on this and to try to put this the various chapters and the book into a larger context. So what I want to do now is I'm going to start by introducing each of the authors. I'm going to use actually the introduction they have given herself in the book. So I'm sort of also then sort of reading from what is said about this person in the book. So the first author I'm going to have here is Jessica Parland-von Essen, is a development manager at CSC, the IT Center for Science in Finland. She holds a PhD in history from the University of Helsinki, Finland, and has studied book history, library and information science, and worked with digitalization within the cultural heritage sector and research data management. She's a member of Open Knowledge Finland, has been a proponent for open scholarship of both the national and international level. Recently, she has studied research data management and is working to find solutions for promoting and supporting well-documented and managed publications of research output, especially different types of data. So, Jessica, over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really happy and honored to be part of this book. I've been yes, as it became obvious here since long ago, really interested in this subject. And now I've maybe drifted a bit away from historical research. And as it becomes clear also from this presentation, that I'm working currently more with research data and research data management. So in this chapter, I give a sort of background or a general look on like the context of research data and the research data management from the historian's perspective. Of course, one important thing and point is that when you're doing work within a digital context, you always have the possibility to produce reproducible research, and you should and could and should document what you are doing, so that all bits and pieces that are important can be reused and shared and validated and so forth. So as mentioned in my chapter, I'm talking about research data management, the data lifecycle, and about the FAIR principles that state that data always should be findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. that's on a very generic level. In a practical level, it often is made into very technical requirements about how to create metadata, machine reasonable metadata, persistent identifiers and such. So the requirements, there are a lot of technical aspects also on this, which I don't go very deep into this because it's developing very, very quickly. So I was also a bit careful when going into this technical details, but more on a generic level. And also I discuss a bit the differences between the cultural heritage metadata or data management, and then how the research data is really different from this, and the problems that might cause, because yeah, the data types are different. The research data, actually, when it's not anymore in the archive or in the library, it becomes dynamic and it keeps changing, and questions about provenance and source criticism and also preservation are become relevant. And I think historians are especially good, well equipped to understand this long life cycle thinking, and realizing that you need to document provenance, and you need to curate things so that they can be taken care of. So and also from my current point of view, I recognize this very fact that these are things that researchers cannot do by themselves on their own, but they always need the support of a research infrastructure. So that's in short my chapter.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you. And as I said, we reserve all the questions until we have all the presentations, and then we're going to open up for questions and discussion from the rest of you. Thank you, Jessica. Then we move on to chapter 9 by Heidi Kurvinen. And Heidi Kurvinen is a postdoctoral research affiliated with the Department of Cultural History at the University of Turku in Finland. She has a PhD in history from the University of Oulu, Finland, and she's specialized in the history of feminism and media history in the Nordic countries, and currently works at an Academy of Finland postdoctoral fellowship in her project, The Traveling Image of Bra Burners, Negotiating Meanings of Feminism in the Finnish Mainstream Media from the 1960s to 2007. She's a board member of the Nordic Media History Network and head of the editorial board of Kulturhistoria, cultural history book series published by the Finnish Society for Cultural History. As an aside, before I let Heidi in, I will say that this is one of my favorite chapters in the book, because it sort of shows sort of a new historian that hasn't really been engaged with the humanities, how she becomes involved in this, and that sort of the struggles that she's encountering there, and some of sort of the promises also, which I think is something that all of us that have sort of entered into digital history can recognize. So Heidi, over you.
Thank you, Mats. As you said in your introduction, I'm one of those scholars who hugely benefited from the course on digital history that Mats mentioned in his speech, and was organized in May 2018. And the chapter is my first attempt to use digital history approach in research. As you can all see in the slide, my chapter is titled Studying the Early History of Finnish Feminism with Digital Methods, My Journey to the World of Digital Humanities. And it is first and foremost a self-reflexive text in which I ponder whether a scholar who has limited IT skills can learn to conduct a basic digital humanities analysis. And in addition to this, my chapter discusses the need for feminist historians to engage with the wider field of digital humanities in order to contribute to the discussion on gender as a relevant category of analysis in digital humanities projects. The case study of my chapter dealt with the late 19th century and early 20th century feminism in Finland. I focused on the period between 1884 and 1929, and was particularly interested in transnational connections. I used Mallet and conducted topic modeling based on 10 topics for a pool of data that I had gathered with the search word Naisasialiike, women's suffrage movement. which is the word that is most commonly used to refer to the early feminist organizing in Finland. And the analysis was made with a relatively small pool of data because the search word listed only 50 articles from Päivälehti Helsingin Sanomat, the biggest national newspaper in Finland, that I used as my source. In the chapter, I also discuss other search words that could have been used to conduct the analysis, such as Naisliike, women's movement, and Naisasia, women's cause, which both produced a wider pool of data from the National Library of Finland's digital interface that I used to gather the data. The word Naisliike received 255 hits, and the word Naisasia almost 900 hits. However, in the chapter, I argue that such a big data would have made it difficult to use the article writing process in an opportunity to reflect on the relation between feminist research and digital humanities. And that was something I was particularly interested in as a feminist historian. As you heard from Matt's introduction, I'm a beginner in the field of digital humanities, and I'm most comfortable with close reading of data, or have been most comfortable until now. However, my experience of writing this article clearly demonstrated that conducting a basic digital analysis is possible even for a beginner if she receives enough support to do it. And in my case, the support came from this digital history course. And in the chapter, I'm using a combination of close and distant reading. Within the limits of this small scale project, the results were not mind-blowing, but they merely strengthened the results of other scholars who had conducted close reading of similar kind of data and had focused on the intertwined relation between national and transnational on the history of early feminism in Finland. However, the data also revealed some new and previously unresearched questions, such as the use and development of vocabulary relating women's issues in Finland. And additionally, the results of big data analysis exposed new ways of perceiving the material, and in the chapter I argued that they may revolutionize gender history by revealing gender in places that previous research has not been able to grasp. To be more specific, I argue that by challenging also feminist scholars to take a step back and look at the material from distant, digital history has a potential of changing our understanding of gender patterns in the past. Simultaneously, I argue that gender sensitivity is needed in the field of digital humanities to guarantee that digitization of archival sources and other material, such as print media or books, do not focus solely on canonical pieces or notable people of history. And even though gender has been written in the history increasingly since the 1960s, digitized collections often maintain gender bias when men's history tends to be viewed as more important. And to sum up, I hope that this will change in the future, and my chapter makes a small contribution to this discussion, as well as shows that it is possible to start to learn how to make a digital history analysis, even if you have limited IT skills. Thank you.
Thank you, Heidi. Thank you. So let's move then on to the next chapter, which is chapter 11 by Mela, which some of you have already seen here at the conference. And Mela is a visiting researcher at the Department of Business Studies at Uppsala University, Sweden. He has a PhD in History and Civilizations from the European University Institute in Italy. He was previously a postdoctoral scholar at Aalto University in Finland. Mela has a background in social science history, and his research focuses on themes such as intellectual property rights, commodification of nature, and transnational relations. And he has extensive experience in multidisciplinary digital humanities research and has published on Nordic patenting and innovation networks and the use of large digitized textual data in historical research. So Matti, over to you.
Thank you, Mats. My chapter was on the tradition of allemansrätten, which most of you probably have heard of, in Finnish, jokamiehen oikeus, and it's a right of public access to nature. which is often described as a Nordic tradition, or at least a national tradition in Finland, Sweden, and to some extent in Norway too. And the idea of the chapter was to study the emergence and trajectory of the term. And Allemansrätten is a well-known principle today. It's a kind of a part of national identities. It's used in national branding. But if we look at scholarly literature, the history of Allemansrätten, especially its public uses, is very little researched. For example, if we look at the work by Anna Stens and Camilla Sandström, this is one of the publications. They study selected discussions basically from the official sources, parliamentary sources. But now with the new corpus, this is a new corpus that was at the time just published by the Parliament of Finland in PDF text files covering the whole 20th century. So when I started in the book project, this was the first attempt to actually use these documents and to conduct research with them. And such a large textual corpus of public talk, we could say, it allowed us to really study and have finally a good look at the term and the uses. And some of the results. So first of all, in the chapter, I do quite good analysis of the data, the actual data, because it's novel data. I look at the quality and the kind of transformation when you transform it from a PDF to TXT files, which you can then use in the analysis. And one of the observations is here, we've had some presentations about parliamentary research here in the conference, and something that is very good with parliamentary data is that it's open, and for example, in contrast to newspapers, which often have copyright restrictions, we can use this as to cover longer time periods. Some results about Allemansrätten is that we had anecdotal knowledge about this, but it really becomes common only after World War II. And in the Finnish case, it appears first as fishing rights. Then only in the 1970s, it's discussed in the way that we know it today. And finally, it expands into many other areas of discourse where actually national identity issues are discussed. For example, the EC membership in the early 1990s. And this is actually very similar in Sweden too, but somehow the debates have not been very much related to each other. Some experiences from the book, which I also discuss in the chapter. First of all, I mentioned about a trade-off for digital historians, and with this I mean that there's often very much data work and tool development required when one starts digital research, and this is something that we should perhaps consider much more. How good is our data? How structured data is it? Do we have ready-made tools? How much do we need to do ourselves? And this is a kind of trade-off, that how much resources do we have for the project? So shall we take the steps in data work, or shall we just then maybe narrow the research or use some other sources than the digital data for our purposes? Another experience from this book project was that actually this PDF data was unstructured, and there was lots of things one needed to do to start using them. And later I started working with the Semantic Computing Research Group at Aalto University, and we developed this into an application for Academy of Finland, which led into a research project which started to this year. And the idea is to actually make a portal which allows to use the parliamentary data, offers some tools, and so actually makes the work for historians, researchers, and also other people, journalists, or just the citizens to use the important data. Thank you.
Thank you, Matti. Then we move on to chapter 17 by Risto Turunen. Risto Turunen is a doctoral candidate in history at Tampere University, Finland. He has a master's degree in history from the University of Tampere, and he's currently finishing his thesis on his origin, structure, and evolution of Finnish socialism as a political language from the 1860s until 1917. Turunen has published articles on labor history, conceptual history, and digital humanities. And I can also mention that Risto is going to hand in his dissertation this week, I've been told. So I'm very happy that he can take time off to give this presentation today. Risto, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So good afternoon, Sweden. My name is Risto. I come from Finland, and my contribution to this book deals with the Finnish socialism at the turn of the 20th century. So I analyzed temporality in the political language of Finnish socialism, and by temporality I mean the way human beings experience time. And the secret goal of this article was to introduce some simple methods from corpus linguistics to historians, because I truly believe that they can be helpful when we construct our historical arguments. So in this short presentation, I focus on the collocation method, but I also used word frequencies over time and key collocation in this article. So let us begin from that visualization on the right. What do you see in that weird image? I made this image with LibreOffice, and the computational analysis was done with Unconc, and both of them are freely available online. And the dataset is based on the raw text files of 3 largest labor newspapers in Finland. I downloaded them from the National Library of Finland. So in quantitative terms, we are talking about 180 million words, which is not the largest dataset in the field of digital humanities, but its size is so large that it exceeds human cognition. In other words, it cannot be tamed by close reading methods only. So this visualization on the right, it shows the words that appear more frequently than statistically expected in close proximity to a certain word in Finnish language. And by close proximity, I mean a window of 5 words to left and right from this specific word. Can you perhaps guess what is the word which invites this kind of vocabulary in the labor press? Societal system, situation, system, society, conditions, capitalist, expensive, miserable, and so on. Well, the word used for this analysis was present in Finnish, something like nu tid or nuvarande for svenska. And from this visualization, we can see that the present has some interesting patterns in the socialist language. I highlight 3 aspects of this socialist conceptualization of the present. First, you can see that the socialist present seems to attract phenomena that are considered to be negative. In addition to the abstract concept of misery, the readers of the socialist newspapers were frequently introduced with the more concrete evils of shortage, unemployment, and war in the visualization. And this negativity was enforced with adjectives such as miserable and hard and difficult, especially when talking about current conditions. Second, it seems that the misery of the socialist present was not accidental, but systematic. Words societal system, and society in this figure hint to this socialist pattern of conceptualizing the present. The everyday had a structure, and those great capitalist state, economic, and municipal forces shaping the present were not mystical nor divine, but explainable through a rational analysis. So socialists did not only disapprove the present with negative words, but they also tried to explain the causal mechanism behind it by arguing that the present system was the root of all evil. The third and final pattern I see in this visualization is related to the connection between the present and the future. That is, to the words implying change and movement. For example, the present situation indicates a new way of thinking that is not limited by eternal conditions created by God in the beginning of time. In addition, the socialists used frequently the phrase prevailing conditions to undermine the foundations of the present status quo. An example, modern socialism is thus a product of the prevailing economic and social conditions in the present. So, although the present was systematically bad, there was hope in the sense that if the present capitalist society was indeed a temporary product of a historical process, then society would surely change in the future too. To summarize, in this article, the collocation method gave me a massive amount of low-level information on the semantic content of the concept of the present in socialist newspapers. And this computational distance reading helped me to discover that the socialist present had 3 strong patterns. The present was negative, systematic, and changeable. Of course, as always, it depends on the skills of a historian if this low-level information can be transformed into a profound historical argument or not. And the argument I'm making in this article is that this new kind of temporality in the political language of socialism, a new way of understanding the flow of time, it did not only concern the future, but also the present. In other words, socialism redefined the relation between the expected and the observed. The higher the expectation towards the future were loaded, the more critical the observations on the nature of the present became. So when one saw the sun of socialism in the future, the present appeared in a very bad light, as you can see in this visualization. Thank you.
Thank you, Risto. Now we move on to the last chapter presentations here, which is also the last chapter in the book, which is sort of one of the conclusions in the sense. And we got to, was very lucky to get Joe Guldi to read through all our chapters and then basically try to summarize what are we actually saying here. So it was perfect to have this sort of, in a way, outside view to what are we trying to say here, and also in some ways also implying what maybe we should say or what we could say more. So Joe Guldi is Associate Professor of Britain and its Empire at Southern Methodist University, the United States. She has a PhD in history from the University of California, Berkeley, and she was the inaugural Mellon postdoctoral fellow in digital history at University of Chicago, and is currently principal investigator of a $1 million NSF grant, National Science Foundation grant in the US. The Unaffordable World is the name of the grant, which uses digital methods, among others, to inquire into the history of property rights and affordability. Joe, over to you. Joe, are you there?
Matt, can you hear me?
Yes, we hear you fine.
Very good. All right. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to have it was wonderful to be involved in this project at every stage in its conceptualization. It was an extremely ambitious project. I think more ambitious than most edited volumes, in that it started out as a broad conversation about the state of the field of history exposed to digital methods, and then it gave airspace to scholars from every part of the historical imagination, from the ancient world to the modern world, using a variety of methods. We heard about topic modeling and collocation just now, but the whole range of the digital humanities was on display. So in the conclusion, I wanted to speak directly to that diversity and the power of that diversity, as well as the implications for the next steps of the discoveries that I read in this volume. When sometimes in working with journals that don't have a digital humanities focus in history, one sometimes hears the caricature that digital history is the Borg. It's an outside force. It's empire. It's going to steamroll all of our unique developments, all of the specific concerns that have evolved in the disciplines and subfields of history, or it's something irrelevant. It's just an ornament. So it's just an ornament that's kind of, you could put things online, but it's not really meaningful. You're giving a gold star. So what I saw in this volume was something very different. That in the diverse, if we imagine the practice of history as a diverse landscape. Here's a tool shed, there's a clock tower, there's a sheep farm, there's a factory. The digital humanities is like installing solar panels. You can install them anywhere, in any of these landscapes, and they enhance what people were already doing. They don't change the fundamental nature of mucking out a sheep farm or manufacturing widgets in a factory. Just so, when a feminist historian engages with digital historical methods, she is still concerned fundamentally about the language and culture and interactions of society as it comes to conceive of women and identity in a new way in the modern era. When a political historian works with parliamentary data, they're still concerned with the ethics of debate. They're still interested in the event and the rise of the event and how we chart that and document it and its meaning. The methods of the digital humanities don't disrupt the nature of the enterprise. They leave the fundamental inclinations of the work preserved. So the result of this process that Mats and his co-editors inaugurated was a broadcast, inclusive and ecumenical transformation of history, which showcased the many variations of historical thinking and the extremely diverse ways that they reached out into the toolshed of digital history to collect methods that would be appropriate to their specialization. It's not a colonization of the humanities under a single ideological form. It's not the steamrolling of humanities knowledge. No, it's the crystallization, a next step of many diverse queries about what language is doing or what culture is doing at a certain period of time. Nevertheless, if you step back from the landscape of the humanities and digital humanities, and you look at them from a distance, as this edited volume allows us to do, it's possible to notice some trends in the emerging field which are worthy of note because they point the way for future directions of research. So I highlighted 4 of these. The first is a need for theorizing the bridge between distant and close reading. Most of the chapters in this volume, to some degree, handle distant and close reading. They move between the particular and overarching generalization. But unfortunately, in most journals today, there are few examples of historical or literary practice that moves from the distant overview down to the level of authors, words in context, actual statements, other categories or particular passages in historical text, and thus demonstrate to readers who are used to closer reading practices the viability and the results of a search based on the close reading of this page. The practice of distant and close reading is evolving. Kinds of collocation analyses that we've been hearing about provide one important pattern for future scholars, but there must be others. The same tools that draw our attention to words can be used to compare individual speakers, individual texts. They can be used to compare political parties or regions of nations, or perhaps even national discourses. And indeed, and part of the beauty of this work of distant reading is that appropriately used, it's possible to draw down the argument from an overview of all of the texts in the inquiry down to particular paragraphs, to sentences, to words that the computer has identified as exemplary, the most exemplary sentence of a particular concept and collocation pattern. It's possible to move from cherry picking examples to a more grounded style of scholarship where we're using quantitative methods to say this is definitively the most circulated passage of the Bible, or the most definitively circulated passage of Mill. This is an exemplary sentence of the kind of phenomenon and socialist thought that I'm thinking of. So thus, for example, if a scholar is looking at parliamentary texts and they find that an important collocation of internationalism is nation, it would be useful to learn next which individual speaker in Parliament put those 2 words together most frequently, and which individual speech in Parliament juxtaposed those concepts the most? And was that the first of a longer trend of examining the dynamics of internationalism and the nation? Or was that the high point? Did it exhaust the discourse, that one speech? Where does it rest in the temporality of this investigation? So additional measures such as these may build upon the work that we've seen here with historical exactitude, lending confidence from readers that particular sentences are given as examples, not merely cherry-picked for their familiarity or by accident or by haphazard, offer foundational instances of, in the history of a concept and from small examples to big questions and from big overviews back to individual speech acts. The process of movement itself is open to methodological argument, questions of interpretation and over-interpretation. It's important that historians begin to describe their choice of exemplary passages. Thick description of the process of extraction affords an opportunity to articulate the work of human interpretation and machine contextualization. As we examine this frontier of knowledge, we will begin to understand as a community the correct applications of distant reading to work on different scales, including the scale of the corpus, the author, the work, the text, the paragraph, and the word. So a second agenda that comes from this work is the importance of theorizing the difference between artificial intelligence and statistical measures. In the work here, in the edited volume, we see scholars employing a huge range of methods for understanding clusters of words. There's a raw word count and collocation analysis. We heard about topic modeling. Terms of art in the book also include mutual information and neural nets. Now, all of these terms are abstruse and unfamiliar to historians who have been training before the present moment. And a naive observer, or even somebody who's advancing fairly quickly into the digital humanities literature, might be tempted to think that any one of these quantitative methods for clustering concepts or words are doing the same thing, or that the terms are interchangeable, the methods are interchangeable, they will all produce similar results. But the rational basis for choosing one of these quantitative approaches could not be more different. Mutual information, for example, is statistical. It's based on vintage statistical properties pioneered in the 1950s and 1960s. It can be described at every point as a mathematical choice of differentiation. But neural nets is part of the technology of machine learning, developed mainly from within computer science departments, aiming to mirror human processes of categorization based on iterative attempts to match programmed human responses modeled by the computer. And its interior workings essentially represent a black box of pattern recognition. You can't go back and describe the differences between these word counts mathematically. So some scholars in the computer sciences herald a day where autonomous computer intelligence will obviate human supervision in most domains, including maybe education. But computer scientists in other parts of the department and other colleagues in the university are more skeptical. And they argue that artificial intelligence in most cases relies on labor-intensive hand tooling of research questions to algorithms in the code. More precise and transparent answers, they suggest, are to be had from old-fashioned statistics. So humanists are...
Could you
yes.
sum up?
Yes. Well, humanists are far from the centers of these debates, but our testing and algorithms, our successes and failures have implications beyond our discipline. And this book is, in any case, it's my congratulations to the editors and authors of this book. This book is an important achievement. It places Scandinavian researchers at the center of a forward-looking collective effort to understand the fit between humanistic knowledge and digital methods. And it deserves to be read not just in Finland and Sweden, but also around the world. Thank you so much, Mats.
Thank you, Joe. And now we're over for the presentations. Now we have